Hi, I'm Steph and welcome to Lesson 6 of the HSC Core Social and Cultural Continuity and Change. This lesson looks at the influence that continuity and change have on the development of society at micro, meso and macro levels. So the first thing we need to do with students is work out what a micro, meso, macro focus actually is. And we do this using land links. So you can talk about a micro focus being something really small, like maybe a mushroom on the ground or an ant walking around. And then you can move on to a meso level focus, and you can say that's slightly bigger. So maybe if you lift your head up and look around, everything that you can see around you, the trees, the smaller trees, the grasses, birds, whatever animals you can see in your immediate line of vision is your meso level. And then you move to a macro focus, and maybe this is a Google view from the sky looking down of the area that you've been looking at. So you might see the pond and the trees and the garden seat where you sit, or whatever you see when you zoom out on Google Images. Now that will actually require you to get images. Just take pictures. Go and stand somewhere where there's trees, somewhere where there's a natural environment, hopefully somewhere where the students are familiar with, so maybe somewhere on the school grounds, and get a photograph of micro, meso, macro level nature that you can see there. And if the students can recognise the environment in which you're photographing, that's even better. So then what you do after that is you extrapolate that to whole countries. So just like this nature scene has micro, meso, macro levels, so does a whole country. And then you talk about your micro level being the family, you talk about meso level being structures in your community, such as community groups and schools and churches, that sort of thing. And you talk about macro being the country as a whole or the whole world. So you basically start with your nature analogy and then extrapolate out to the whole world. The next thing you're going to do is read this extract from My People's Dreaming. It's supplied in the reader, and it's all about trees and songlines. And it basically says that trees live in communities, which is something that we've already started discussing back in lesson 1, and I think again up to lesson 6. So it should be an analogy that students are familiar with. And we talk about the songlines as being like the mobile phone network. And when land was cleared around a sacred site, the songlines couldn't get through. The songlines were broken, just like if you cut the mobile phone network, you get a mobile phone dead spot. So it's an analogy of community, and we're talking about communities of trees, communities of organic living things, as an analogy for communities of people, for our own social structures. So you apply concepts of continuity and change that we've already been looking at on all of the 3 different levels. So we discuss the different levels in our bushland analogy and then extrapolate out to whole countries. So how does a change that happens in a country affect the micro, meso, macro level? That's that next thing that's the next step that you talk about. Then we also make sure that we mention that things that take place can happen on all 3 levels at once. So the tree that we're growing, the pot plant, for example, it has a place in the micro world. It's a seedling. It also has a place in the meso world. If we look around, we'll see it. But it also has a place in the macro world. So we need to talk about how a change to that small tree that we're growing in the pot can have ripples across the micro, meso, macro world. So the next thing we do takes us to these symbols and images and these non-verbal concepts. Once we've explored all of these concepts of the 3 levels and continuity and change over those 3 levels, we're going to do this bit. Students are going to represent the micro, meso, macro concepts with symbols and images that will convey the meaning of this lesson to them. So the types of symbols that they use aren't really important. What is important is that those symbols carry a meaning with them that will help students to recall the content of lesson 6. So I hope you have fun with that one. As you can see, it incorporates land, links, symbols and images and non-verbal. It also, as all the lessons do, runs through this Torres Strait Islander drum model. We start with an overview of what is a micro, meso, macro focus and looking at the world in general. We then move through an exploration of that when we're talking about types of communities and change at communities on different levels. And then we come through to rebuild that, to reconstruct that by creating our own symbols and images and our own non-verbal representations of what we have just learnt. So hopefully this will help to cement the deep knowledge for the students so that they can retain this information. Thanks.